Hey guys, Karenology here. This one is pure gold. Pettiness, drama, and an ending that will leave you speechless.
My name is James Reeves, and I've always considered myself a peaceful man. Living on the edge of a pristine lake in the small, tight-knit community of Lakeside Ridge, I thought my biggest concern would be how to spend my weekends, fishing or relaxing on the deck. But that illusion shattered one morning when I woke to the deafening roar of construction equipment. The sound wasn't coming from a neighbor's property, it was coming from my land. Throwing on a jacket, I stormed out to find a construction crew unloading equipment, while a bulldozer was already tearing into the ground near the tree line. I rushed over, waving my arms to stop the machine. "What the hell is going on here?" I yelled, my voice barely cutting through the cacophony. A man in a hard hat approached, holding a clipboard. "We're starting work on the new community parking lot," he said casually, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "Parking lot? On my property?" I was incredulous. Before he could answer, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. Karen, the head of the Lakeside Ridge Homeowner Association. She was a middle-aged woman with a perpetual scowl, perfectly coiffed hair, and an air of unearned authority. "Oh, James," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's all in the community's best interest. Your land is being repurposed for the greater good. You'll understand once it's finished." "Repurposed? By who? This is my property, Karen." Karen's smirk didn't waver. "The homeowner association has the authority to make these decisions. The paperwork has already been processed. Everything is perfectly legal." She handed me a stack of documents. My hands trembled as I skimmed through the papers. They looked official, stamped and signed, declaring a portion of my lakeside property as communal land under the association's jurisdiction. None of this made sense. I'd owned this land outright for years. There was no way they could just take it. "This is illegal," I said firmly, shoving the papers back at her. "Get your crew off my property right now, or I'm calling the police." Karen's eyes narrowed, her friendly facade cracking. "I suggest you reconsider your tone, James. The association has the community's support. Fighting us will only make things harder for you." I didn't care about her veiled threats. I pulled out my phone and dialed the local sheriff's office. Within 30 minutes, a deputy arrived. Karen, of course, played the victim, painting me as an unreasonable neighbor who was standing in the way of progress. "Deputy," I said, pointing to the construction equipment, "this is my private property. These people are trespassing." The deputy examined the documents Karen had provided. He frowned but didn't take immediate action. "Mr. Reeves, these papers look legitimate. If you want to contest this, you'll need to take it up in court." Karen's smug grin returned as the deputy drove away. "See, James? I told you everything was above board. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." As the construction resumed, I felt a mix of anger and helplessness. But I wasn't about to give up. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts churned with frustration and disbelief. How could they get away with this? I pored over the documents Karen had handed me, searching for anything that could invalidate their claims. Then I noticed something odd. The signature authorizing the repurposing of my land wasn't mine. It was forged. The realization lit a fire in me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or bureaucratic error. This was outright fraud. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a lawyer, someone who specialized in property disputes. The second was to the county records office. By noon, I had confirmation. The documents Karen had presented were fake. The homeowner association had no legal right to touch my land. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the construction site. The crew was still there, digging up my property. Karen stood nearby, supervising. "Stop everything," I shouted. "I have proof that your documents are forged. You're trespassing, and if you don't leave right now, I'll have you all arrested." Karen's confident demeanor faltered for the first time. "Forged? Don't be ridiculous, James." I held up the evidence. The county records office confirmed it. "These signatures are fake. You've been caught, Karen." For a moment, she looked like she might argue. But then she smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "This isn't over, James Rum," she said. "You may have won this round, but the homeowner association always gets what it wants." As the construction crew packed up and left, I knew she wasn't bluffing. This was just the beginning of a much larger battle, but I wasn't afraid. Karen had underestimated me, and I was ready to fight for my land, no matter what it took. After the initial victory of halting the illegal construction on my land, I naively thought I'd earned a moment to breathe. But Karen, true to her word, wasn't about to back down. She unleashed the full force of the homeowner association's resources against me, determined to make my life a living hell. It started subtly. My mailbox was suddenly filled with violation notices. One claimed my lawn was overgrown, another accused me of improper placement of my trash bins. Each notice carried a hefty fine, and they arrived almost daily. Then came the letters from the association's lawyer, threatening further legal action if I didn't comply with their demands. My frustration grew, but I refused to give in. I meticulously documented every notice, every fine, and every conversation I had with Karen and her cronies. If they wanted to play dirty, I would fight back with facts and evidence. One evening, I returned home to find a large "for sale" sign planted on my property. My stomach churned with anger as I ripped it out of the ground. A note taped to the back read, "You can't win. Sell while you still can." The audacity of it all left me speechless. Karen was escalating, and I knew she was trying to break me. But I also knew I couldn't afford to let her antics go unchecked. I called my lawyer, Mark Caldwell, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had already started building my case. "This is harassment, plain and simple," Mark said after I recounted the latest incident. "But we need to gather more evidence. Keep documenting everything, and don't engage directly with Karen or her associates. Let me handle the legal side." The next escalation came in the form of sabotage. One morning, I discovered my boat, which had been securely docked at the lake, had sunk halfway into the water. The ropes holding it in place had been cut. Furious, I took photos and reported the vandalism to the sheriff's office. The deputy who arrived to investigate was the same one who had reviewed the forged documents during the construction fiasco. "This looks deliberate," he said, inspecting the frayed ends of the ropes. "Do you have any enemies, Mr. Reeves?" I didn't hesitate. "Karen, the head of the homeowner association. She's been targeting me ever since I stopped her illegal construction project." The deputy sighed, clearly reluctant to get involved in what he likely saw as a neighborhood dispute. "I'll file a report, but without direct evidence, there's not much we can do." His words were disheartening, but I wasn't about to give up. I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands. The next weekend, I installed security cameras around my property. If Karen or her lackeys tried anything else, I'd have undeniable proof. The first few nights passed quietly, and I began to think the cameras had scared them off. But on the third night, the footage revealed something shocking. In the dead of night, a shadowy figure crept onto my property. The cameras captured them cutting the wires to my outdoor lights and spray painting obscenities on my fence. The intruder wore a hoodie and gloves, but their movements and build were unmistakable. It was Karen. The next morning, I handed the footage over to Mark. His reaction was a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "With this evidence, we can file for a restraining order and strengthen our case against the homeowner association." Karen must have realized her mistake because she didn't show up to the next association meeting. Instead, one of her loyal board members, a man named Richard, took the reins. He wasted no time attacking me publicly. "James Reeves has been a disruptive force in our community," Richard announced, his voice dripping with feigned concern. "He refuses to comply with the association's rules and has brought unnecessary conflict to Lakeside Ridge." I stood up, my heart pounding with anger. "Disruptive? All I've done is protect my property from your illegal actions. Maybe the real disruption is coming from Karen and her forged documents." Gasps echoed through the room. Richard's face turned red, but he quickly recovered. "Those accusations are baseless. The homeowner association has always acted in the community's best interest." I pulled out a copy of the video footage, holding it up for everyone to see. "Really? Because I have proof that Karen vandalized my property. What's in the community's best interest about that?" The room erupted in murmurs, and Richard's confidence faltered. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he stammered. "We'll conduct an internal investigation." But I wasn't about to let them sweep this under the rug. "No need," I said firmly. "My lawyer will be handling it." That evening, as I returned home, I felt a mix of triumph and unease. Karen and her allies were cornered, but I knew they wouldn't give up easily. Sure enough, later that night, my phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "Back off or you'll regret it." The battle was far from over, but I was ready. If they thought threats would scare me, they were sorely mistaken. The anonymous threat shook me, but didn't deter me. If anything, it solidified my resolve. Karen and the homeowner association had pushed too far. They thought they could intimidate me into submission, but they didn't realize they'd just fueled my determination to fight back harder. The following morning, I met with Mark at his office. I handed him my phone with a threatening message still displayed on the screen. "They're getting desperate," Mark said, his brow furrowed. "This is good. It shows they know they're losing. Did the number come through?" "It was blocked," I replied. "Can we trace it?" "We can try, but it's a long shot. Still, this kind of harassment adds to our case. Let's focus on the evidence we do have." Mark had already filed for a restraining order against Karen, and now with the video footage, the anonymous threat, and the forged documents, we had a solid foundation for a lawsuit. But I wanted more than just legal action. I wanted to expose the corruption within the homeowner association for everyone to see. I spent the next week gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I went door to door, speaking with my neighbors. Many were sympathetic but hesitant to get involved. Karen had ruled the homeowner association with an iron fist for years, and most people were too afraid to cross her. One neighbor, an elderly man named Frank, surprised me by inviting me inside. He poured us both a cup of coffee and then leaned in close, speaking in hushed tones. "Karen's been up to no good for a long time," he said. "She's got connections, people in the city council, contractors who owe her favors. Most of us just keep our heads down to avoid trouble. But if you're really serious about taking her on, I might have something that could help." Frank disappeared into another room and returned with a worn envelope. Inside were copies of emails between Karen and a construction company. The emails detailed plans to use association funds for personal projects, a new patio for Karen's house, landscaping for her backyard, all disguised as community improvements. "Where did you get this?" I asked, stunned. Frank hesitated. "Let's just say Karen isn't as careful with her computer as she should be. Just don't tell anyone where you got it." Armed with this new evidence, I returned to Mark's office. His eyes lit up as he read through the emails. "This is a gold mine," he said. "Not only does it prove misuse of association funds, but it also shows a pattern of corruption. We'll include this in our filing, and once we make it public, Karen's going to have a lot more to worry about than just you." But Karen wasn't about to go down without a fight. A few days later, I received a certified letter from the homeowner association. Inside was a notice informing me that I was being fined $10,000 for violations of community standards, and that a lien would be placed on my property if I didn't pay within 30 days. I slammed the letter down on my kitchen table, my hands trembling with anger. This was extortion, plain and simple. Karen was trying to bankrupt me to force me out. Mark was unfazed when I showed him the letter. "They're bluffing," he said. "They can't enforce a lien without proper legal grounds, and we can easily prove these fines are baseless. But it's another example of their harassment, which works in our favor. Let them dig their own grave." Meanwhile, I doubled down on securing my property. The cameras I'd installed had already proven their worth, but I added motion-activated lights and reinforced my fence. I also started keeping a close eye on Karen and her associates. If they tried anything else, I'd be ready. One night, my vigilance paid off. The security cameras caught Richard, Karen's right-hand man, sneaking onto my property. He was carrying what looked like a canister of paint. As I watched the footage in real time, I called the sheriff's office. By the time the deputies arrived, Richard was caught red-handed, halfway through spray painting a vulgar message on my garage door. He tried to claim it was a prank, but the deputies weren't buying it. They arrested him on the spot. The next day, the story was all over the neighborhood. Karen tried to distance herself from Richard, claiming he'd acted on his own, but the damage to her reputation was already done. People were starting to see her for what she really was. At the next homeowner association meeting, the tension was palpable. Karen was there, but she looked rattled. Her usual confidence had been replaced by a veneer of forced composure. I stood up during the open forum. "For too long, this association has been run like a dictatorship. Karen and her allies have used their positions to bully and intimidate homeowners, misusing funds and breaking the law. But the tide is turning. I have evidence of their corruption, and I'm not afraid to use it." Karen tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand to silence her. "You can't scare me, Karen. The truth is coming out, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." The room erupted in applause. For the first time, I saw cracks in Karen's armor. She looked around the room, realizing she was losing her grip on the community. But I knew better than to let my guard down. Karen was cornered, and a cornered animal is always the most dangerous. The tides were beginning to turn, but Karen wasn't going down quietly. After Richard's arrest and the growing dissent within the community, she launched a full-scale smear campaign against me. Flyers appeared in mailboxes accusing me of endangering the community and spreading lies about the homeowner association. Her tactics were desperate and transparent, but they still sowed seeds of doubt among some residents. Mark called me early one morning. "Karen's flailing," he said, his tone both amused and serious. "But we can't let up now. The next step is filing our lawsuit. Once this goes public, she won't be able to hide behind her lies." By the end of the week, Mark had filed the suit. We were suing the homeowner association for fraud, harassment, and property damage. The evidence we had collected, from the forged documents to the security footage, was damning. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through the community. People who had been too afraid to speak out started coming forward with their own stories of Karen's intimidation tactics and misuse of power. At first, Karen tried to maintain her composure, but as the lawsuit gained traction, she began to unravel. Her confident facade gave way to erratic behavior. She called an emergency homeowner association meeting, presumably to rally support, but it quickly turned into chaos. The meeting was held in the community center. The room was packed, with homeowners eager to hear what Karen had to say. She stood at the podium, flanked by a few remaining loyalists, and launched into a tirade about how I was tearing the community apart. I stood in the back, arms crossed, waiting for my moment. When she paused to catch her breath, I stepped forward. "Karen," I said, my voice calm but firm, "you've spent years abusing your position. This isn't about me, it's about your actions. Misusing funds, forging documents, vandalizing property, the list goes on. And now you're trying to shift the blame onto me?" The room fell silent. Karen's face turned red as she stammered for a response. Before she could speak, another homeowner, a woman named Linda, stood up. "James is right," Linda said. "I've been on the receiving end of Karen's bullying too. She fined me for having flowers in my yard that weren't approved by the association. Enough is enough." One by one, others began to speak up. Stories of Karen's overreach and corruption filled the room. Her remaining allies tried to defend her, but their voices were drowned out by the growing chorus of complaints. Finally, Karen snapped. "You're all ungrateful," she shouted, slamming her hand on the podium. "Everything I've done has been for this community." Someone in the crowd shouted back, "For your own benefit, you mean?" The meeting ended in disarray. Karen stormed out, her loyalists trailing behind her. The rest of us stayed, discussing how to move forward. A sense of solidarity began to form among the homeowners. For the first time, it felt like the community was standing together against the tyranny of the homeowner association. But Karen wasn't finished. The next morning, I woke to find my car keyed and my mailbox smashed. It was clearly an act of retaliation. I filed another report with the sheriff's office, but Karen had covered her tracks well. There were no witnesses, and without direct evidence, the deputies couldn't do much. Mark, however, was undeterred. "This only strengthens our case," he said. "It shows a pattern of harassment. Keep documenting everything." Meanwhile, the lawsuit was making waves beyond our small community. A local news station picked up the story, framing it as a classic David and Goliath battle between an overreaching homeowner association and a homeowner fighting to protect his rights. The coverage brought even more attention to Karen's misdeeds, and the pressure on her continued to mount. A week before the first court hearing, I received a call from an anonymous number. The voice on the other end was shaky and nervous. "Mr. Reeves, I need to tell you something," the caller said. "Karen's been paying off city officials to look the other way. She's also been using association funds to cover personal debts. I have proof." The caller agreed to meet me at a nearby diner. When I arrived, I was surprised to see Richard, the same man who had been arrested for vandalizing my property. He looked exhausted and defeated. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, skeptical. "Because I'm done being her pawn," he said. "She's ruined too many lives, and I'm not going down with her. Here." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, email exchanges, and even audio recordings. It was everything I needed to bring Karen's corruption to light. At the first court hearing, Karen's lawyer tried to argue that the lawsuit was baseless, but Mark methodically dismantled their defense. When we presented the evidence Richard had provided, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Karen's lawyer visibly paled, realizing the uphill battle they were facing. Karen herself was called to the stand. Under cross-examination, she tried to feign ignorance, but the evidence was overwhelming. By the end of the hearing, it was clear to everyone in the room that Karen's reign was coming to an end. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me for comments. I kept it brief. "This isn't just about me," I said. "It's about standing up to corruption and protecting our rights as homeowners. No one is above the law, not even the head of a homeowner association." Back in Lakeside Ridge, the atmosphere had shifted. The homeowner association board voted to remove Karen as president, and a special election was scheduled to replace her. The community was finally free from her grip, but the fight had left its mark on all of us. As for me, I felt a sense of vindication, but knew the battle wasn't truly over. There were still legal proceedings to resolve and damages to repair. But for the first time in months, I felt hope. Karen's downfall was a victory not just for me, but for everyone she'd wronged. Though Karen had been publicly humiliated and removed from her position as president of the homeowner association, she wasn't finished. Her vindictive nature drove her to launch a counterattack that threatened to escalate the conflict beyond anything I had anticipated. 1 week after the court hearing, I found an official-looking envelope taped to my door. Inside was a lawsuit. Karen was suing me personally for defamation. The accusations were absurd, claiming I had spread malicious lies about her to damage her reputation. Mark, my lawyer, laughed when I showed him the papers. "She's grasping at straws," he said. "This lawsuit is baseless, but it's a tactic to drain your energy and resources. We'll counterfile and request it be dismissed immediately." Mark's confidence reassured me, but Karen's actions were relentless. Within days, anonymous social media accounts began posting inflammatory claims about me. They accused me of fabricating evidence and being a menace to the community. The posts gained traction, and suddenly I was being approached by neighbors asking if the accusations were true. "It's Karen," Mark explained when I told him about the posts. "She's trying to turn public opinion against you. But the truth is on your side, and we'll make sure it comes out." Despite Mark's assurances, Karen's campaign against me took a toll. My once peaceful life at Lakeside Ridge had turned into a battlefield. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. One night, I returned home to find my property vandalized again. This time, it was far worse than a keyed car or spray paint. Someone had poured cement into the lock of my front gate and cut the wires to my security cameras. They left a message scrawled in red paint on my garage door. "This isn't over." I called the sheriff immediately. The deputies who arrived were sympathetic but admitted there was little they could do without direct evidence. Still, I wasn't entirely without recourse. The vandalism, combined with Karen's escalating behavior, was more ammunition for our legal case. Mark moved quickly, filing a restraining order against Karen and pushing for an expedited hearing. At the same time, he coordinated with the local police to provide additional patrols around my property. But the fight wasn't just about defense. We were also preparing for the next big confrontation in court. The hearing for the defamation lawsuit arrived sooner than I expected. Karen's lawyer tried to portray me as a vindictive troublemaker who had orchestrated a smear campaign. But when Mark presented the evidence we had, the forged documents, the vandalism, and the financial records Richard had provided, Karen's case crumbled. During cross-examination, Karen's composure shattered. Under pressure, she admitted to authorizing the vandalism as a way to send a message and misusing association funds. Her confession sent shockwaves through the courtroom, and even her own lawyer looked horrified. The judge dismissed her lawsuit with prejudice, meaning she couldn't file again. Additionally, Karen was ordered to pay damages for her harassment and cover my legal fees. It was a decisive victory, but it came with a bittersweet realization. Even with the law on my side, Karen's actions had left lasting scars on my life and my community. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Karen's reign of terror was finally over, but the battle had taken its toll. Lakeside Ridge was a quieter place now, with Karen's influence gone, but the wounds she had inflicted on the community would take time to heal. Back at home, I stood on my deck, looking out over the lake that had once been my sanctuary. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of peace. Karen might have tried to destroy me, but in the end, she had only destroyed herself. After Karen's crushing courtroom defeat, I hoped the worst was behind me. But the aftermath of her downfall brought a new wave of challenges. Her remaining loyalists on the homeowner association board refused to go quietly. They saw Karen's failure as a rallying cry, and doubled down on their efforts to discredit me and maintain their hold over the community. The first sign of trouble came in the form of an emergency meeting notice slipped under my door. The agenda? A vote to impose stricter fines and penalties on non-compliant homeowners. It was a thinly veiled attempt to target me and anyone else who had opposed Karen's regime. Mark and I attended the meeting, which was held in a tense and divided atmosphere. The loyalists, led by a man named Greg, argued that the new measures were necessary to restore order. Their rhetoric was full of coded language about problem homeowners and maintaining community standards. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and faced the room. These proposals aren't about order or standards, I said. They're about control. The homeowner association should serve the community, not bully it. Karen may be gone, but her toxic legacy lives on in these measures. We deserve better. A heated debate followed. The room was split. Some residents supported my stance, while others, still fearful of backlash, hesitated to speak up. In the end, the vote was postponed, but the message was clear. The battle for Lakeside Ridge wasn't over. Meanwhile, Karen's personal vendetta continued to simmer. Though she'd been stripped of her authority, she found other ways to harass me. Anonymous complaints flooded the city council, accusing me of code violations ranging from unauthorized renovations to illegal use of property. Inspectors began showing up unannounced, but each time they left empty-handed. It was clear Karen was orchestrating the campaign, but proving it was another matter. Mark suggested we file another restraining order, but I wanted something more permanent. I began working with sympathetic board members and neighbors to gather signatures for a motion to reform the homeowner association's bylaws. If successful, it would strip the board of much of its unchecked power and implement safeguards to prevent future abuses. As the reform campaign gained momentum, Karen's loyalists grew increasingly aggressive. Flyers appeared around the neighborhood, accusing me of trying to dismantle the community. One night, I caught Greg and another board member on camera tampering with my mailbox. The footage was damning, and when I handed it over to the sheriff's office, they were charged with misdemeanor vandalism. The incident galvanized the neighborhood. Residents who had been on the fence began to see the lengths Karen's faction would go to maintain their grip on power. Signatures poured in, and within weeks, we had more than enough to force a special election. The election was the culmination of months of conflict. On the day of the vote, the community center buzzed with energy. Residents filed in to cast their ballots, many of them voicing frustration with the way things had been run under Karen and her allies. The tension was palpable as the votes were counted. When the results were announced, a wave of relief washed over me. The reform measures had passed overwhelmingly, and several of Karen's loyalists were voted out of their positions. The remaining board members, facing a newly empowered community, resigned shortly after. Karen's reign was finally over, but the victory felt bittersweet. The fight had taken a toll on the neighborhood, leaving scars that would take time to heal. Still, there was hope. With the new reforms in place, Lakeside Ridge could begin to rebuild as a community rooted in fairness and cooperation. As for me, I finally had my life back. Standing on my lakeside deck that evening, watching the sun set over the water, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. The battle had been long and grueling, but in the end, justice had prevailed. With Karen's influence finally eradicated and the homeowner association restructured, Lakeside Ridge entered a new phase. The reforms passed during the special election empowered the community to have a stronger voice, but the division Karen had sown wouldn't disappear overnight. My role in the fight had left me both respected and controversial. Some neighbors saw me as a hero, while others whispered that I'd gone too far. I decided the best way to move forward was to focus on rebuilding trust and fostering unity. Alongside several newly elected board members, I organized a town hall meeting to discuss the future of the community. The goal was simple: transparency and collaboration. The turnout was better than I expected. Residents who had avoided previous meetings, fearing Karen's wrath, now felt safe enough to attend. "We've been through a lot," I said, addressing the room. "But this is a chance for us to come together and make Lakeside Ridge a place we're all proud to call home. No more secrets, no more intimidation. Let's start fresh." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Neighbors began sharing their ideas for community improvements: new park benches, better lighting along the walking trails, and even plans for a summer block party. For the first time in months, the atmosphere felt hopeful. Despite the progress, Karen's shadow lingered. Though she had been ousted, her loyalists still spread rumors and tried to sow doubt about the new board's intentions. One particularly vocal critic, Mrs. Harper, accused the board of mismanaging funds during a public meeting. "How do we know this isn't just more of the same?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The room grew tense, but I remained calm. "That's a fair question," I said, "and the answer is transparency. Every dollar spent will be documented and available for everyone to review. This is your association, and you have the right to hold us accountable." Mrs. Harper didn't look convinced, but others in the room nodded in agreement. It was clear that rebuilding trust would take time, but I was committed to proving that the new leadership was different. As the weeks passed, small victories began to pile up. The vandalized property around the neighborhood was repaired, the financial records Karen had hidden were audited, and community projects were launched with broad support. The summer block party became a symbol of the community's newfound unity. Families brought food, kids played games, and for the first time in a long while, people laughed together without tension hanging in the air. During the event, Linda, one of the neighbors who had spoken out against Karen, approached me with a smile. "You did a good thing, James. It's not perfect yet, but it feels like we're finally heading in the right direction." Her words meant more than she knew. The fight had been exhausting, and there were moments when I doubted whether it was worth it. Seeing the community come together reaffirmed that standing up to Karen had been the right decision. Karen herself, however, hadn't disappeared entirely. Rumors swirled that she was living in a neighboring town and still trying to interfere with Lakeside Ridge by filing complaints with local authorities. While none of her efforts gained traction, it served as a reminder that her vendetta wasn't truly over. "Mark advised me to keep documenting everything just in case. People like Karen don't give up easily," he warned. "But she's lost her platform. Without the association's power, she's just another angry voice shouting into the void." I took his advice and stayed vigilant, but I refused to let Karen's lingering presence overshadow the progress we were making. By the end of the summer, Lakeside Ridge felt like a different place. The fear and hostility that had once defined the community were fading, replaced by a spirit of collaboration. The reforms we'd implemented ensured that no one person could ever wield the kind of unchecked power Karen had abused. As I stood on my deck one evening, watching the lake shimmer under the setting sun, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The battle with Karen had been grueling, but it had also revealed the strength of the community. Together, we had reclaimed our neighborhood and laid the foundation for a better future. As the summer turned to fall, life at Lakeside Ridge finally began to settle into a new rhythm. The community had started to heal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't entirely over. Karen's shadow still lingered, a constant reminder of the months of chaos she had caused. Though her influence was gone, the scars of her tyranny remained. One morning, as I reviewed my mail, a letter from the county court caught my eye. Inside was a notice that Karen had filed an appeal against the previous rulings. My heart sank. Despite her defeat, she was determined to keep the fight alive, dragging the legal process out even further. Mark called me later that day. "This is a desperate move," he said, his voice steady. "Her appeal is unlikely to succeed, but it will take time to resolve. Stay focused on the positives. We've already achieved so much." Still, the news stirred up old anxieties. I had come so far to rebuild my life and help restore the community, and Karen's refusal to let go felt like a personal attack. But instead of letting it derail me, I channeled my frustration into action. With Mark's help, I prepared to face Karen one last time in court. As the weeks passed, the appeal hearing loomed closer. In the meantime, I threw myself into community projects. One initiative, spearheaded by Linda and me, focused on creating a neighborhood watch program. The vandalism and harassment we'd endured had shown us the importance of being vigilant and looking out for one another. The program gained traction quickly. Volunteers signed up to patrol the neighborhood in shifts, and we installed additional lighting and cameras in shared spaces. The sense of security this brought to Lakeside Ridge was palpable. For the first time, people felt empowered to protect what was theirs. The day of Karen's appeal hearing arrived with a chill in the air. Mark and I sat in the courtroom, waiting as Karen and her new lawyer presented their arguments. They claimed that the initial rulings were unfair and that Karen's actions had been misunderstood. When it was our turn, Mark dismantled their claims with precision. He presented the same damning evidence that had led to Karen's defeat: the forged documents, the misuse of funds, and her role in orchestrating vandalism. By the time he finished, the judge looked unimpressed by Karen's arguments. After deliberating briefly, the judge upheld the original rulings, dismissing Karen's appeal. A wave of relief washed over me as the gavel struck. Karen's last-ditch effort to claw back her power had failed. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited for comments. Mark spoke on my behalf, emphasizing that the outcome reaffirmed the importance of accountability and justice. "This case isn't just about one man's property," he said. "It's about standing up to corruption and ensuring communities like Lakeside Ridge are places where fairness and integrity prevail." Karen left the courthouse in silence, her once commanding presence reduced to a shadow of itself. As she disappeared into the crowd, I felt a sense of finality. Though her vendetta had dragged on far longer than I'd ever imagined, it was clear her reign was truly over. Back at Lakeside Ridge, the atmosphere was lighter. With Karen's appeal dismissed, the community could finally close this chapter and focus on moving forward. The Neighborhood Watch program flourished, and new projects, like a community garden and a lakeside cleanup, brought residents together in ways that felt meaningful and hopeful. One evening, as I walked along the lake's edge, I ran into Frank, the elderly neighbor who had first provided me with the emails that exposed Karen's corruption. He smiled warmly, leaning on his cane. "You did good, James," he said. "You stood up when no one else would. We owe you for that." I shook my head. "We all stood up, Frank. That's what made the difference." As the sun set over the water, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been grueling, but the fight had been worth it. Lakeside Ridge wasn't just a place to live anymore. It was a community. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like home. With Karen's appeal dismissed and her influence finally extinguished, the atmosphere in Lakeside Ridge shifted for the better. The reforms implemented in the homeowner association began to show tangible results, creating a sense of accountability that had been absent for years. Residents who had once avoided association meetings now actively participated, contributing to a new culture of openness and collaboration. Despite the progress, there were still remnants of the chaos Karen had caused. Her loyalists, though fewer in number, continued to stir trouble. Greg, the former board member charged with vandalism, had taken to spreading rumors that the new board was no better than the old one. His efforts, however, gained little traction as the community saw the positive changes firsthand. One lingering issue that remained unresolved was the financial mess Karen had left behind. The audits revealed significant misuse of funds, including payments to contractors for projects that were never completed. The board voted to pursue legal action to recover the stolen money, but it was a slow and arduous process. To speed things along, I reached out to Linda and Frank to form a financial oversight committee. Together, we began reviewing old contracts and invoices, uncovering additional irregularities. One particularly damning discovery was a series of payments to a company owned by Karen's cousin. The evidence was clear. Karen had used the association's funds to line her family's pockets. This discovery led to a new lawsuit, one that garnered significant attention from the local media. The community's resolve strengthened as residents rallied behind the effort to hold Karen accountable. While the legal proceedings would take time, the collective determination to see justice served was a powerful unifying force. Amid the legal battles, life in Lakeside Ridge began to flourish again. The Neighborhood Watch program continued to expand, and new initiatives like a community library and a weekly farmers market brought residents together in ways that felt meaningful. These small victories reminded me why the fight had been worth it. One evening, Linda and I hosted a town hall to celebrate the progress we'd made. The turnout was incredible, with neighbors filling the room and sharing stories of how the changes had improved their lives. Frank, who had been instrumental in exposing Karen's corruption, stood to speak. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "But we can't forget the lessons we've learned. Accountability, transparency, and community. Those are the values that will keep Lakeside Ridge strong." His words resonated deeply, and as the applause filled the room, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about undoing Karen's damage. It was about building something better. Karen herself had gone quiet since the appeal. Rumors suggested she had moved out of state, though no one could confirm it. Occasionally, I'd catch wind of her filing frivolous complaints with local authorities, but they were largely ignored. Mark, ever vigilant, advised me to stay cautious but reassured me that Karen's ability to cause trouble was minimal. "She's burned too many bridges," he said. "Her reputation is ruined and her resources are depleted. You've won, James. It's time to enjoy the peace you fought so hard for." One quiet afternoon, as I walked along the lake's edge, I spotted Greg sitting on a bench. He looked weary, the fight seemingly drained from him. Against my better judgment, I approached him. "Greg," I said, keeping my tone neutral, "you don't have to keep doing this. The community is moving forward, and you could be part of that." He sighed, staring out at the water. "I thought Karen was doing the right thing," he admitted. "I didn't realize how wrong I was until it was too late." "It's not too late to make things right," I said. "We're stronger together, Greg. Think about it." He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes suggested my words had struck a chord. As I walked away, I felt a glimmer of hope that even those who had opposed me could find their way back to the community. By the end of the fall, Lakeside Ridge had transformed. The community wasn't perfect, but it was thriving. The hard-fought battles against Karen and her loyalists had forged a sense of unity that would endure for years to come. And as I stood on my deck, watching the golden hues of sunset reflect off the lake, I finally felt at peace. As winter settled over Lakeside Ridge, the neighborhood found its footing as a stronger, more united community. The lessons learned from Karen's reign and the battles fought against her loyalists had reshaped not just the homeowner association, but the relationships among the residents. The fight for justice had bonded us in ways I never imagined possible. The final piece of the puzzle was the conclusion of the legal battles. The lawsuit against Karen for financial mismanagement had progressed slowly but steadily. With the evidence uncovered by the Financial Oversight Committee, the court ruled in favor of the association. Karen was ordered to repay the stolen funds and fined heavily for her actions. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a moral one. The funds recovered from Karen's corruption were reinvested into the community. The board, now transparent and accountable, organized a series of projects, repaving damaged roads, restoring the lakeside walking trails, and installing new playground equipment for families. Each project symbolized a step forward, a tangible reminder of the community's resilience. One particularly cold evening, the board held a celebration to mark the end of a tumultuous chapter. The community center was decorated with lights and filled with laughter. Neighbors who had once been strangers now shared stories, food, and genuine camaraderie. Linda approached me during the celebration, a warm smile on her face. "James, you were the spark we needed," she said. "Without you, I don't think we would have found the courage to stand up to Karen." I shook my head. It wasn't just me, it was all of us. The community came together, and that's what made the difference. Her smile widened. "Well, I think the new Lakeside Ridge owes you a lot more credit than you're willing to take." Despite the celebration, I knew Karen's legacy wouldn't disappear overnight. Her loyalists had all but retreated, and while a few attempted to stir up dissent, their influence had waned significantly. Greg, who had been one of Karen's staunchest allies, surprised everyone by publicly apologizing during a town hall meeting. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I followed the wrong leader and let my pride blind me to what was right. I want to make amends and help rebuild this community." His words were met with cautious optimism. While trust wouldn't be rebuilt overnight, his willingness to take responsibility was a step in the right direction. Months later, as spring began to bloom, the neighborhood felt renewed. The projects funded by the recovered money were completed, and new initiatives were already underway. The community garden flourished, the walking trails were alive with activity, and the lakeside, once a source of tension, had become a tranquil retreat for everyone. One afternoon, as I sat on my deck overlooking the lake, Frank joined me. He carried 2 cups of coffee, handing me one before settling into a chair. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he said, gesturing toward the water. I nodded. "Better than I ever imagined. It's been a long road, but we got here." Frank sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "You know, James, this place wouldn't be what it is without you. You fought for what was right, even when it felt like the odds were against you." I looked out at the lake, the sunlight dancing on its surface. "I think we all fought for what was right," I said, "and that's what makes this victory belong to everyone." As I watched the lake that afternoon, I felt a profound sense of closure. The chaos Karen had brought into my life was gone, replaced by peace and purpose. Lakeside Ridge had become more than a neighborhood. It was a testament to the power of resilience, unity, and standing up for what's right. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, this community would face them together.